Shalom, TITHES, officer of the Thousand Yahweh, and we're going to get right into this, a Monday night history class, and today we're teaching on the history of the Cheyenne Indians, or the Cheyenne Native Americans, right? So we went over a few other ones, I think the Comanche, the Sioux, and these were, and we also did the Lakotas, right? So this is another tribe that's in that sort of that kind of area. They kind of got along with the Sioux, and they were fighting against the Apache. So that's how, they started getting famous. So, but all right, let's get into it. And it also was where, Cheyenne, Wyoming is named after. All right, the Cheyenne are a tribe of Algonquin linguistic stock who are closely allied with the Arapaho and Gros Ventre, and loosely allied with the Lakota Sioux, one of the most prominent of the Plains tribes. They primarily lived and hunted on hills and prairies alongside the Missouri and Red Rivers. They call themselves Tisseats, which translates several different ways to people alike, our people, red talker, or people of a different speech. Originally, the Cheyenne resided in the Great Lakes area in Minnesota and on the Missouri River. Here, they lived in earth-covered log houses in permanent settlements, farmed and made pottery. However, in the late 1600s, they began a westward migration, most likely due to competition and conflict with the Ojibwe, the Arikara, and Mandan Indians. As they migrated southwestward, their lifestyle changed to that of a nomadic hunters and gatherers. In the 1700s, the Cheyenne acquired horses from the Spanish and became expert buffalo hunters, which was the life they were leading when Lewis and Clark encountered them in 1804 in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Pushed farther into the plains by the hostile Sioux, the Cheyenne in turn drove the Kiowa further south, the Kiowa tribe. In 1832, the Cheyenne split into two groups, one inhabiting the Platte River near the Black Hills, and the other living near the Arkansas River, further south in Colorado. However, bands of the tribe were known to have inhabited every state in the American West at various times. So they were known that, they lived in a certain area. They had like homes and all of that, and then they eventually started becoming more nomadic. So like they started being more traveling. Once they started having beef with other tribes, they started going and being more nomadic and, traveling as the buffalo went. So those who had moved to the Arkansas River found themselves in conflict with the Kiowa, who, with the Comanche, claimed the territory. Numerous battles took place between them up until 1840, when an alliance was formed with the Kiowa, Apache, and Comanche tribes. By the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, the first Cheyenne territory was established in northern Colorado, consisting of present-day sites of Fort Collins, Denver, and Colorado Springs. It's a nice area. It's full of like mountains and all of that. It's a nice area. Their peace with the Kiowa enabled them to extend their incursions further to the south. And in 1853, they made their first raid into Mexico with disastrous results, losing all but 3 of their men in battle with the Mexicans. Okay. So then they went and fought against, other tribes when they went against Issachar. So and they ended up losing. As more and more white settlers pushed west in the 1850s, the Cheyenne, along with their new allies, began to rebel against the pioneers, as well as the U.S. Army. When gold was discovered in Colorado, the 1851 treaty was broken and the territory that had been ceded to them was taken away. So, you know, all of the devils, they started moving westward. So while they were moving westward, they broke all the trees because they left that land. They said, okay, you can be here. But now when they see, that's what a reservation is. A reservation is where you put your reserves at. So if you ever need it again, you can just go back and get it. So that's where the reservation comes from. You understand? So they can always come back. If they found gold in that area, they can always come back and get it. Okay. That's the Pikes Peak Gold Rush in 1858 brought attention to a boiling point. Indians soon began to attack wagon trains, mining camps, stagecoach lines, a practice that increased during the Civil War, when the number of soldiers in the area was greatly decreased. So they started attacking like all the different, because you know the settlers kept moving in, so this became like what they call it, like there's a part of, I've been there before. What do they call it? This is like the Badlands or the bandit area. You ever heard that term like that? It's like this is the bandit town or whatever.
Sir.
I'm trying to think of what the actual term it is. But this is that became like along there was the bandit town. They make it seem like the Native Americans were the bandits. But no, they were only protecting because you said you weren't going to come here. This was ours. They wanted to stay away from them devils, right? So they start coming in. They have every right to come and attack it, right? But they call it something like well, basically when you would go, they would try to drive their. You found it?
Alright, sir. I'm trying to get an idea of what you're saying so I can look it up.
Yeah, it's like in Utah area too. It's like Colorado going into Utah. There's a place there. They call it like the Bandit Land or something like that. I know it's going into Utah. That's what they started calling it.
Yeah, that ain't pulling up nothing for me, I want.
What's another word for bandit? That's probably what it gotta be. Look up another word for bandit.
Okay.
It's something like that.
Robber, raider, mugger, freebooter, outlaw, desperado, hijacker.
Might be the outlaw. Let me see.
Criminal, crook, rustler, thief, gangster, lawless. Hoodlum.
I can't think about it. I can't think what it was. But it was like an area where you would go through and they would come, and a lot of the Native Americans would come and raid those areas. Like I said, this was, they signed a treaty and said, we're not going to mess with you. But what do? Come in and mess with you.
Right.
So they didn't trust them, you know what I'm saying? And why would they? Look at what they did to them. You see, we didn't went through all these Native American tribes. None of them got treated like even humans. They all got treated like animals, man. So they wanted to, they come in to fight. You basically like, okay, it's funny with America, like, okay, if the Mexicans go to America, what do they consider?
Savages.
But it's another way they call it.
You said if the Mexicans come to America, what they call them? Illegal immigrants?
There you go. They call them illegals. Right?
Okay.
But if our oppressor go into there, what is he called?
A vacation.
That too. But what was back in those days? What were they called? We just said the term.
A cowboy?
Close. They were called settlers.
Settlers, okay. Oh,
See the difference?
right.
They going on, this is Native American land. They going on their land. So what are they considered? Illegals.
Right. Right.
Might have been like what they call it, bandit country or outlaw country or something like that. That's what they went over there. That's what they want to call them outlaws and bandits. When they didn't come to your house and take your stuff. You came into theirs, and they came and took it from you, which they should. Right?
Right.
What happens if you try to come into America with something they could consider contraband? They gonna take it from you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You ever try to go out the country?
Wow, sir.
Like if you try to go, like I used to go in and out of Canada, right? I would go to Canada. Sometimes they would X-ray the truck, all that, and then got the nerve to charge you for it. I'm like, I ain't asked to do this. They want to charge you to go through the X-ray, right?
Right.
And if you went to contraband, what they gonna do? It don't even have to be contraband, but if you have even too much money on you, too much cash, you can have whatever. It can even be like, even when you come into the school with contraband on, what you do happens, you get searched, and they tell you to leave it in the car, right? You can have you a gun, right?
Right.
What they tell you, they say leave it in the car.
In the car.
That's what it is. So that's what, if you come into their land with something, what they supposed to do. But America, you see how they named them settlers. They named them, bandits or liars, treaty breakers, devils.
Right.
That's why I wish that we can hear the Native American account. That's when you're gonna see something.
Right.
You know what I mean? Alright. Indians soon began to attack wagon trains, mining camps, and stagecoach lines. A practice that increased during the Civil War, when the number of soldiers in the area was greatly decreased. Soon this led to what became known as the Colorado War of 1864 to 1865. This bloody battle reached its worst point in what is known as the Sand Creek Massacre, which occurred in November 29th, 1864. If I'm not mistaken, this is actually where they got Thanksgiving from. While the Indians were encamped under the promised protection of Fort Lyon, Chivington led his 700 troops to Sand Creek and positioned them, along with 4 howitzers, around the Indian village. That's like a weapon that they had around the Indian village. Despite the repeated attempts to surrender, the troops slaughtered more than 150 Native American men, women, and children. After the brutal massacre, the defensive battles against the encroaching white settlers and the U.S. Army increased. The Cheyenne people were then forced to move to a reservation in Oklahoma, where another skirmish occurred in the early morning hours of November 27, 1868. After a number of communication breakdowns, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led the 7th U.S. Cavalry in an attack on a band of peaceful Cheyenne known as the Battle of Washita River. The Indians were legally encamped on a reservation land with Chief Black Kettle when more than 100 Cheyenne were killed, mostly women and children. Though Chief Black Kettle had a white flag flying above his teepee, he was killed in the battle. So they even surrendered. This was a peaceful tribe, right? I think this is one of the 5 civilized tribes, right? And they still going through killing them. But then they don't speak about, if we have a war, if 5 of their men die, it's like it's like all hell is broken loose. But they can kill hundreds of us, and it's just it's like taking a pig out to the slaughter or something. That's all it is. And Chief Black Kettle, he had actually had a white flag over his teepee, so he's given up, and they still killed him. In the Battle of Little Bighorn, June 25th, 1876, the Cheyenne, along with the Lakota Sioux and a small band of Arapaho, annihilated George Armstrong Custer and his troops near the Little Bighorn River, known as the greatest Native American victory. 262 soldiers died in the battle, while only estimated 60 Indian warriors were killed. Following the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the attempts to force the Cheyenne onto a reservation in Indian Territory intensified. In 1877, almost 1,000 Northern Cheyenne were forced to march to Oklahoma, where they found dire conditions, and many became ill and died from malaria. So now they forcing them. This is also the other part of the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears wasn't just from Florida to Oklahoma. It was marching them all into Oklahoma, right? Though the Cheyenne from the south grudgingly accepted the Oklahoma reservation, many of the Northern Cheyenne, unable to adapt to the hot weather, fled back to the north, led by Chiefs Dual Knife and Little Wolf. In 1878, the U.S. Army attempted to round up the escapees, killing many of them en route. The band soon, when they leave and they want to do something, they round them up and they kill them, but that's fine. They call them escapees. But the other people, they call them settlers when they went onto their land. So when they attacked them, now they're bandits. No, right? So they killed many of them en route. Right? The band soon split, with one group led by Little Wolf, who made it back to Montana safely. The other group followed Dual Knife and were captured and escorted to Fort Robertson, Nebraska. Sequestered, the Indians steadfastly refused orders to return to the Oklahoma reservation. In January 1879, Dual Knife and his followers escaped from Fort Robertson, though more than 30 of the escapees were shot as they ran from the fort. An estimated 50, included Dual Knife, survived to be reunited with the Northern Cheyenne. And the executive order in 1884 created a reservation for the Northern Cheyenne in southeast Montana. Today, they gave them, these were the, you got some brothers that don't like being in the cold, some brothers don't like being in the heat. They didn't like the heat in Oklahoma, so they wanted to go back up to Montana. So they made a reservation for them, right? Today the Cheyenne occupy two reservations, one at Tongue River, Montana, where some 6,500 people reside. The other reservation in southwestern Oklahoma is shared with the longtime allies, the Arapaho. It consists of about 11,000 members. So some escape and some stay back. Alright, cool it down for one quick second.
Where was you at on the article?
How you get it started?
Alright, start right at the top.
Yeah.
I want you know you can't use that restroom, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, the Cheyenne people carry a tribal name received from their Samoan allies. Well, they all lived in present Minnesota in the 1500s. The name means foreign speakers and was used by the Sioux in reference to Algonquian speaking tribes. The Cheyenne, however, refer to themselves by the name of TITHES, an old term whose meaning is uncertain. The name did not appear in print until the late 1800s and is not generally used by non-Cheyenne, both because the term Cheyenne is embedded in American historical documents and because many English speakers find TITHES difficult to pronounce. I see why. The term is preferred, however, by those who speak the Cheyenne language and adhere to the traditional culture. About 800 Cheyenne in Oklahoma still speak their native tongue.
Alright, go on.
Alright, I'm at the second paragraph right there.
Alright, cool. Alright. Alright, from Minnesota, Cheyenne bands who then lacked horses migrated westward, right? In the 1700s, developing alliances with the Lakota or Teton Sioux, and proceeded to Teton across the Mississippi River into present North and South Dakota. Although the Cheyenne had been hunters and gatherers in Minnesota, some bands during their migration built villages and grew corn along the rivers of the plains. The best known site is Beesterfield, near Lisbon, North Dakota. Other bands acquired horses and adopted buffalo hunting, helping invent the teepee dwelling nomadic way of life known to students of American Indians. During the time, diverse Cheyenne bands lived east of the Black Hills of South Dakota, and it was there that the prophet Sweet Medicine entered a cave into the mountain called Nawaros, known to English speakers as Bear Boot, and received 4 sacred arrows that are still revered by the tribe. Sweet Medicine organized the military societies led by war chiefs whose duties were to keep order and to maintain a hunting territory. Sweet Medicine also established a judicial system operated by 44 senior men known as peace chiefs. Most importantly, Sweet Medicine forbade the killing of one Cheyenne by another, an act that required the cleansing of the sacred arrows in a special ceremony. Sweet Medicine also, thus created the Cheyenne Nation, sovereign and independent. So he created like a whole system, a whole government for them to, rule each other. So they had senior men, they known as peace chiefs. So this is even somewhat even biblical. So they had, judges. They had all of these things here, right? Over the next century, the Cheyenne established a hunting territory between the forks of the Platte River in Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado, and formed an alliance with the Arapaho, who lived near the Rocky Mountains. Although the Cheyenne and Arapaho were both small nations, about 3,000 persons each, As a combined military force, they were formidable. They drove the Kiowa south and prevented the Shoshone from entering the Great Plains from the west. The Cheyenne and Arapaho kept the Blackfeet and the Pawnee out of their hunting territory and became the dominant traders in guns, horses, and buffalo skins in the Central Plains. As its greatest extent, the Cheyenne territory stretched from Montana to Texas and included the Oklahoma Panhandle and areas of the Cimarron and Washita rivers in western Oklahoma. So they had a big land that they was running. They was running all over that. Right? At the close of the Civil War in 1865, the Cheyenne faced their most formidable enemies, the encroaching Americans. By that time, immigrant traffic had denuded the landscape along the Oregon and Santa Fe trails, splitting the Cheyenne into a northern group destined for a Montana reservation, and the southern Cheyenne, who, with their southern Arapaho allies, ended up in Oklahoma. That's how they even got the split there, right? The period from 1830 to 1870 was generally characterized by a series of treaties with the U.S. government, punctuated by episodes of warfare. For the Cheyenne, military high points were the defeat of U.S. Army forces near Fort Kearny in 1866 and at Beecher Island in 1868, and a victory over General George Armstrong Custer's troops at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. The low points were the loss at Summit Springs, Colorado, and at the Battle of Washita in 1868, and the massacre of about 200 non-combatants by U.S. forces at Sand Creek, Colorado, 1864. So like their wars were real wars. You know, of course, our oppressor, he wanted to go and kill women and children. When all the men away, he wants to kill women and children. He wants, like, if you know something about our oppressor, he doesn't like a fair fist-to-fist fight. He wants complete annihilation. That's why he went after the women and children. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so they always want to come. They want to have 10 times the numbers, all of that. They don't want to be, if it's 5,000 troops, go against 5,000 troops. They don't want to do that. Because they know they're weak. What did the Bible say? It said that when they both come out, one is going to be stronger than the other. Right?
Right.
But here's the thing. It said that he's going to get the gift of the sword, right?
Right.
So he's talented in warfare. Everybody knows that there's a difference between warfare and battle, right? Everybody, you know that, right?
Wow, sir, I thought they went hand in hand.
No. A war is a bunch of battles. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
A battle is just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
A war is the complete.
Overall. So.
Yeah, overall, right? And what basically happens is they win the war, but a lot of the battles they don't win. That's why, you know what they do? They go kill the buffalo where you eat from. They poison your food.
Right.
They they give you blankets with smallpox in it. See what I'm saying?
Right.
But they don't battle you. They don't want to battle you. They want to send a unmanned drone across the whole planet and drop a bomb off over there,
right.
Using playing a video game.
Right.
That's what they want to do. Right? Okay. After 1869, Southern Cheyenne bands and families assembled on their assigned reservation in Indian Territory. Fort Reno housed the soldiers who guarded them, and the town as a service center for the reservation and the fort. Reservation government officials operated by administrative order. ignoring the numerous treaties signed by the Cheyenne. So, all these treaties, 3.5 million acre reservation, they ignored those treaties. They said, we're not going to come in there. So like I said, what are they? Illegal aliens. This was a treaty that you won't come into this area. You going to stay where you at, we going to stay where we at. They come in, but they just want to be settlers.
Right.
Right? Or gold miners. They get a legit name. They don't get a what they really are. Refugees. Right?
Right.
That's what they are. Remember they called a bunch of black people refugees when they was leaving from Hurricane Katrina. They called them refugees. They was like, how the hell we a refugee and we live in this country? Right? They are a refugee. Initially, Cheyenne bands gathered around government facilities in Darlington near Fort Reno and at Cantonment near present Canton, where they received rations. After a scandal involving leasing of lands to non-Indian cattlemen, the bands were allowed to disperse around the reservation. Their camping grounds later became the sites of such towns as Hammond, Clinton, Thomas, Sealing, Longdale, Watonga, Calumet, and Kingfisher. With the help of the Quaker missionaries, the Cheyenne began to prosper from farming until the Dawes Act of 1887, requiring them to surrender 3 million acres of their reservation and settle on an 80-acre and 160-acre allotments. So they lost 3 million and had to go to 160 acres. Not wanting to live on dispersed plots of land, many Cheyenne leased their allotments to non-Indians and worked in agriculture or manufacturing. Employment was also increasingly available in the tribal government and government-sponsored projects. Since World War I, many young and middle-aged Cheyenne have migrated to cities to work, especially to Oklahoma City, Dallas, and Los Angeles. So they had to migrate, to find work. So, but they say employment. If the employment was increasingly available, that's they always try to add stuff. So if they say it became increasingly available, so instead of 10 jobs, they had 15 jobs. Like you still gonna have people homeless. That's why if they were increasing so much, why were they leaving and going to the cities? Doesn't make any sense, right? That's right. That's why you got to read through the BS, because we already watched, like the other week we was watching the reservation. Nobody has a job. Nobody's working. Nobody got a slavery. And the one dude, he said that he felt like he may not murder himself. He might not kill himself because he finally has a job now. A job keeps them from killing themselves, man. But they don't give them the job. They let them sit there and suffer, right? On the reservations.
It's a lot, Yahanna.
Go ahead.
The treaty that you're talking about, right? Those settlers came into that land because of
the gold.
Because of the gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was in 1868. I forgot what the treaty was called.
The Dawes Act?
Unceded Indian. No, that's not it. It's a lie. I'm trying to find the name of the treaty. Did you say what the name of the treaty was?
I'm not sure.
Fort Laramie Treaty?
Fort Laramie?
Fort Laramie Treaty? I think that's it. All right, that's it.
Did we talk about that a little bit last week?
I was trying to make sure. It's a lot.
No sweat. And Laramie is another city in Wyoming. So that's part of, you know, they name like Cheyenne is the capital of Wyoming, and Laramie is another city in Wyoming. So they would name it after them. So, you ever been to Wyoming before?
No, I don't plan on going there.
You ain't missing much, I'll tell you that. You ain't missing much. There's nothing really out there. It's just like plains and just
Flat land.
open air, just open space. There's nothing there. I mean, it's kind of like Oklahoma, but it's colder.
Right. Yeah.
So just think of Oklahoma, middle of nowhere,
Right.
but colder and drier and deader. So that's why they had to hunt the buffalo, because they wasn't growing nothing out there.
Right.
It's too damn cold, man. You go out to Cheyenne, there's like, Cheyenne is the size of, like, almost like your backyard. It is tiny.
Damn.
It is a tiny city. It's like one of the only major cities that you'll pass through it like you pass through a town. And it's the capital city. It's small. And Laramie, small too. So, but yeah. But it's very cold out there, especially in the wintertime. Oh boy. So it gets to be freezing out there. Let's see here. For Cheyenne people, the extended family remains the most important social unit, consisting of grandparents and their children and grandchildren, perhaps 20 or 30 people in all. These families frequently live in adjacent houses in the towns of western Oklahoma, and or in the cluster of houses in more remote rural areas. What that sound like, Jake? That sound like Judah, don't it? We all live, you know, we didn't start spreading out until, you know, later on, but we all live right there. I think it was a spot, I'm trying to think of what they call, like my grandma, they all lived, when she was growing up, all her whole family lived like right, I think they called it was like over the chicken wire fence or whatever. Mm-hmm. They called it like that was the other side, other than chicken something, I can't remember what it was. But like the whole family, like one part of the family lived over here on one side, the other part of the family lived on the other side. And they would say, I used to live on the other side or whatever it was.
Chicken wire.
Yeah, something, I can't remember, man. It was a long time ago. She told me about that. And so that's how they would know where each other lived at. So we lived the same thing. That's why when Christ said he came, he said, don't hate, you know, love your neighbor like you love yourself. He was not talking about our oppressor. He's obviously talking about who you live next to. Right. Your brothers, your family members, right. Your tribesmen. Right? Because they lived in clusters of houses right next to each other. How many families units, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like that now. But you know, back in the days, in like the 40s and the 50s, you had this whole neighborhood, it's all one family. Now the whole neighborhood, all one family. Right. You still can kind of see it in the rural areas. It's not as like it used to be. But I even seen like back in the day, like I even seen like not back in the day, but I seen like when I used to have a slave as I used to work, you know, do the mail. I used to be a carrier, right? And it's like it was one black family. They had a whole street that was their whole family. Dang. Yeah, the street was named after they last name. And like their whole family just lived on that street. Dang. So that's how that would be. We lived the same way. Native Americans lived the same way because they wanted to be away from the oppressor, man. They didn't want to live next to them. Right. All right. It said family members see each other often and share economic resources. At the town level, there are good dance and veterans groups, women's craft groups, peyote groups, and Indian Christian churches, of course. All of which unite the local Cheyenne community across family boundaries. These groups support dinners, dances, and powwows. The annual performance of the annual renewal and Sundance ceremonies is a source of pride for the Southern Cheyenne, symbolizing their survival and their hope for the future. Visitors attend the ceremonies by invitation only. Unlike powwows, these are not public or commercial events. So like a powwow is really like commercial. Everybody come there. This is something, you gotta be invited to come here. I bet you they don't mind us coming there. I bet you they don't mind us as much.
Right.
You know they don't want to come there.
Yeah, I'm oppressed.
Cause we, like I said, we got along with the Native Americans, man. Don't let, like, they try to say all these little things like we didn't get along and all of that these are lies. Like, we, of course, any brother is gonna have little fights. But what they do is they blow up our fights. Cause like I said, what is he the master of? He's the master of warfare. He's not gonna battle you a mano a mano. He's not gonna do that. He's gonna get your own brothers to come and kill you. And y'all gonna fight and decimate each other, and then he gonna come in third party and kill the rest of y'all. He gonna let y'all, it's gonna be 100 y'all over here, 100 over here. He gonna let y'all kill each other till there's 10 left on each side, and he coming, and now he coming 100 people and kill you. That's what he's gonna do. Because he's not gonna fight you straight up. Right? I think that's even in that one book, the 48 Laws of Power. Heard of that before?
I heard of it. I haven't read it, but I heard of it.
I read parts of it. But I think that's one way you divide and conquer. Right? Everybody know that war tactic, divide and conquer.
Right.
The traditional laws of the governing Cheyenne people were supplemented by the oral traditions of chiefs and religious leaders. The central body of legal authority, the subject of the Cheyenne Way by Carl Llewellyn and Eve Adamson Hobel. A separate body of Indian law is being built by the operation of federally sponsored Indian court system. And although all Indian people are subject to federal laws, there are some areas of sensitivity and dispute between Cheyenne people and state and local authorities. Patches of federally administrative trust land survive in a reservation area where the state, counties, and cities may not have complete authority, especially at issue with the right of arrest, child custody, and questions surrounding traditional religious practices. All of these remain under negotiation by federal, state, local, and tribal authorities. Okay. The Cheyennes and Arapahoes share a tribal government with equal representation of 4 members each on a business committee headquartered at Concho near El Reno. The committee oversees 4 smoke shops where tax-reduced tobacco products are sold. The Lucky Star Casino at Concho, a bingo hall at Watonga, a recreation complex at Cantunya Lake, and a 3,000-acre farming and ranching operation. Federal government welfare programs are funneled through the tribal government for the benefit of the children, elders, and the disabled. The tribe also administers education projects, but there is no longer an Indian school on the reservation. Federal schooling off the reservation is available for qualified students, but almost all Cheyenne children attend the same local schools as non-Indians. Only about 80,000 acres of the former reservation in Indian remain in Indian hands. 10,000 acres of trust land are owned by the tribal government and 70,000 acres by individuals. Some income is derived from oil and gas royalties, and rent is received from leasing trusts and for grazing. But a lot of these are not the real Native Americans that own these. Y'all do realize that.
Right.
These are the people that say that they're Native American that are not.
Right.
There were 11,507 enrolled Cheyenne Arapaho citizens in 2003. Of those, about 8,000 would consider themselves Cheyenne. There have been attempts to separate Southern Cheyenne from southern Arapaho administratively, but with continued intermarriage, such efforts become more difficult. A current issue concerning many Cheyenne and Arapaho is the receipt of the indemnities for the Sand Creek massacre. So a big issue is they want to get money back from them killing their children. They weren't even part of the war. They went and killed the women and children. Although the federal government promised compensation in 1865, no payment has ever been made. They never sent anything. So the Indians or the Native Americans deserve reparations as well. They don't give them no reparations. Like I said, those land that you see, the trust land, the real Native American Indians do not own that land. These are devils, trying to be Native Americans. And they got the land. All right, we're gonna watch this video.
Now you're seeing the Co-Grand Marshal Ben Nighthorse Campbell, the only Native American Indian serving in the United States House of Representatives. You notice that
some Indian people used to think if you go the white path, you lose your Indianness about you. And other people think if you just stay in with the blanket, as they say, just with the Indian lifestyle, you can't ever survive in the outside community. I just don't think that's true. I think you can do both. And I think more and more Indian people are believing, like I do now, that we say walk both paths.
So now he's trying to convince other Native Americans to walk both paths. To basically, he's the Martin Luther King. He's trying to assimilate the Native Americans into the society, right?
Or live in both worlds. You can do it. And that's what I continually encourage Indian kids to do. Learn the way that's going to make you survive. That's going to
See, look at him. How's he dressed?
Provide food for your youngsters when you grow up. But don't forget the old ways or forget to...
You forgot your old ways. You see his haircut. No beard. Native Americans have beards. All of that. But he ain't got none of that. He look like a little boy. So he assimilated. For what? Money? See, look at all them. All of them got long hair.
Sacrifices that your ancestors made so that you could still be here on this land.
Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell has proven those points by his own example. As a Cheyenne Indian and a U.S. Senator from Colorado, his hard work and determination exemplify the Cheyenne tradition of strength and survival, and his successes have demonstrated to the world that Indians are indeed still here and ready to be heard. The Cheyenne call themselves TITHES, which means the people. The Cheyennes are one of many Native American tribes who speak a language from the Algonquin language family. For centuries, these groups occupied a large expanse of North America, and based on their shared language, we can draw some conclusions about their history.
The Cheyenne were agricultural villagers living in the area of the Great Lakes, and as late as 1750 or so, they were living farming, sedentary, permanent way of life. They ended up moving permanently onto the plains so that by 1780 or 1790, they were roaming throughout the northern and central plains, hunting buffalo, living in nomadic camps, pursuing a very different way of life than they had pursued just 20, 30 years before.
Despite changes in their location and lifestyles, one thing remained constant for the Cheyenne: their spirituality. They felt a deep relationship with the natural world, and believed that it must be replenished on a regular basis through prayers and rituals. The sweat lodge served as a sanctuary for prayer, healing, and various ceremonies. A typical sweat lodge consisted of a round framework of branches covered with animal hides. Today, the sweat lodge is still an integral part of Cheyenne life, except now, the animal hides are usually replaced by tarps, blankets, quilts, and any other usable materials that are available. A fire is built to heat up the rocks. The hot rocks are placed in the center of the sweat lodge. Water is then poured over these rocks to generate steam, very much the way a sauna works. As the steam and temperature rises, the participants sweat, cleansing their bodies of both physical and spiritual impurities as they sing and pray. Perhaps the most important.
So who thought of saunas first? The Native Americans. All the stuff you think, the devils created, our people created a lot of these things, man. So that's what they would do. They have a sweat, because they were sweating out the impurities out of your body. Anybody know why it's good to sweat? Anybody know why?
So like you said, to get the impurities out of your body.
Well, yeah, that's one way. Give me a scientific breakdown. Let's say if you went to biology class, just give me paid attention.
I don't know. I could just say like toxins or whatever, but that's still
Yeah,
impurities,
toxins.
right?
But the main thing is when you sweat, you release salt. You release sodium out your body. That's why if you ever got sweat in your mouth that tastes salty, that's sodium you're getting out your body. Because they did stuff like beef jerky. Beef jerky has a lot of salt. So this is a way they used to get rid of some of that salt, sweating. They would sit there and sweat it all out, and it also it gets rid of free radicals. It actually makes your body a lot healthier by you allowing it to sweat out all of the stuff that's in it.
That's crazy that it's lucky, sir. It's crazy that you say salt, because when you finish sweating, and if you don't wipe it off, you let it dry, it just get
turn white.
It get white and crusty. So
Yep. That's exactly what that is. So they did. They knew how to be healthy, man. That's why I'm not saying this. A pig is disgusting because the Most High says it's disgusting.
Right.
For us to eat. But one of the things that's bad about a pig is the reason why we get high blood pressure is because pigs don't have sweat glands. So all of that sodium, when he moves around, it goes into all this muscle and fat. So you basically is eating condensed sweat. That's what you eat when you eat that bacon. You eating sweat meat. That's what you eat. Eat all that pork and all that. That's what you eat. Because they don't sweat and they don't get rid of toxins like a clean animal does.
Right.
Like a goat not a goat. Might be a goat too, but a cow. When we eat a cow has 4 stomachs to clean out everything, all of the toxins.
Right.
All of that has all these things that cleans itself out. But a pig eats everything. He eats the garbage disposal.
Right.
All right.
Cheyenne ceremony is the sun dance that celebrates the beginning of the Cheyenne New Year. During the 4 days of fasting and dancing, the people pray for the welfare of the world, their tribe, and those among them who need special help. The Cheyennes kept a sense of continuity by repeating time-honored religious rites, but gradually, life on the plains introduced major changes in their society.
Cheyennes considered themselves to be members of their mother's band, and that tended to be the band in which they lived most of their life. Once they got onto the plains, though, that matrilineal rule was relaxed, because one of the things about a nomadic existence is you need to have flexibility. You need to have the ability to move from one band to another if conditions change, and a matrilineal way of life is much too rigid for that kind of flexibility.
One of the reasons flexibility was needed was that many Indian groups were suddenly competing for the same resources.
The Cheyenne were moving onto the plains at a time when other peoples were as well. The Arapaho, the Sioux, They came into conflict with those peoples as well as with the Pawnees, who had lived on the Central Plains for thousands of years. They came on and immediately began to compete for access to bison and especially for control of trade.
Trade became crucial for American Indians in the 1700s because for many tribes it was the only way to get horses. Horses had been brought to the New World by Spanish colonists in Mexico and gradually spread across the continent. The Cheyenne soon became very skilled at breeding, riding, and trading horses. This greatly increased their ability to hunt, travel, and conduct warfare when necessary. Warfare was carried out by one or more of the Cheyenne's 5 military societies. Of these, the most notable were the Dog Soldiers, who were among the most feared warriors in the region. Despite their power, the military societies always worked in concert with the chiefs and the Central Tribal Council.
The Cheyenne had a Central Tribal Council called the Council of 44, and this was made up of the leaders of each of the Cheyenne bands. These tended to be older leaders who had already been warriors and now were spending most of their time engaged in trade activity. The Council of 44 was then balanced, sort of like one branch of government balanced with another, by the Cheyenne military societies, which were made up of younger warriors, men who were still proving their reputations for leadership. If they were going to go to warfare, if they were going to make a big move, both had to agree. One could not act without the other. It was a very nice balance of power there.
So they had councils. It's like we do, they have war councils. It's like the Most High, he has war councils. That's all that is. So they got one side, you know, they got the older brothers that is gonna pass down the wisdom. Alright? Because the wisdom of battle, they're gonna pass that down to them. So it keeps re-educating, so every generation becomes better warriors over and over.
This governing structure helped to ensure tribal unity and coordinate the actions of numerous bands across a wide area. In this way, the Cheyennes came to dominate much of the Central Plains. But while the Cheyennes started to expand across the West, so did the young nation on the continent's eastern seaboard. After the Louisiana Purchase in 1804, the United States laid claim to the land that the Cheyennes and numerous other native peoples inhabited. White settlers, or Anglos, began filtering westward. Some wanted farmland and a place to raise a family. Others...
So what they call them? Settlers. They already made treaties that they wouldn't go into this land. But what do? Going anywhere. Illegal aliens, that's what they call it. Refugees.
Right.
Devils.
hunting and trapping grounds for beavers and other fur-bearing animals. And still others came west in search of gold and silver.
The Cheyenne ranged, once they got onto the plains, from Wyoming and Montana down into Texas and Oklahoma. That meant that when Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado were settled, either for agricultural purposes or for mining purposes, that sort of drove a wedge into the center of the Cheyenne range. And it had led to the sort of division of the Cheyenne into the northern and southern Cheyenne.
The U.S. government recognized that it would need the Indians' cooperation to continue settling the plains. In 1851, it organized one of the most spectacular meetings of American history. Over 10,000 Indians, representing over a dozen tribes, gathered near Fort Laramie in what is now Wyoming. They made peace not only with each other, but also with United States agents, and signed the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The Indians could not foresee the result, that hordes of white Americans were about to pour across the Mississippi and into their lives. Native Americans saw the land as something sacred, to be shared and preserved by all, not something that could be owned by individuals. But the newcomers seemed to see things differently. They put up fences and built armed forts across the plains. Worst of all, they began destroying the buffalo herds on which the Cheyennes depended.
Well, I think all Indian people, the Mother Earth that they feel a part of, particularly where their ancestors lie, the remains of their ancestors, it takes on a different connotation than just ownership in the white sense of the word, where I own a certain tract of land and it's bounded by certain fences or certain geographic dimensions. It's totally different for Indians because they feel a spiritual kindredness to it. Not to be on that land to them is like taking away part of their church.
Although most Cheyennes remained peaceful, other tribes did not. Tensions grew to the breaking point, and a delegation of Indians went to Washington to seek peace. Representing the Cheyennes were Chiefs Lean Bear, War Bonnet, and Standing in the Water. They met with President Abraham Lincoln and came away feeling they had been heard fairly. Out west, however, anti-Indian hysteria was unabated. Soldiers, seeking a band of violent Arapahoes, stumbled instead upon a Cheyenne hunting party. It was led by Lean Bear, still wearing the peace medallion given him by President Lincoln. As Lean Bear saw the soldiers and rode up to them, they shot him dead. Furious, the Cheyennes retaliated. The dog soldiers were led by Bull Bear, Lean Bear's brother, and they were particularly fierce in their attacks on wagon trains and settlements. Finally, the U.S. Army attempted to reach agreement with the Cheyennes. Major Edward Wynkoop met with Chief Blackkettle, and the two men formed a mutual trust. Many lodges of Arapahoes were camped near Fort Lyon, where they expected to receive food and protection from the Army. Blackkettle's band made plans to join them, but had to wait due to lack of food at the fort.
I'm gonna explain something else to y'all. Like, you see, they make laws and they make treaties to keep law-abiding citizens to, I'm not trying to say it. They try to keep law-abiding citizens, people that keep their word, right? They do that to keep them from acting out. That's like I'm a proponent of black people having sewing machines. You know what I mean, right? Right. So, as you see with the Buffalo mass shooting, right? You seen what that happened, right? Are the politicians, they use that to try to say that we need to keep sewing machines out of people's hands, right? Right. But here's the thing. They're only going to do it for black people. Like, they're only going to do it for poor people. That's who is designed. All of those laws, they say we're going to try to keep you safe. They're only designed to keep poor people from having sewing machines. If you understand. Right. They're going to make it so expensive the only people that can have them are criminals and the wealthy. It's the only people that can have them. They're going to fine you to death about having them. Like, you can go to New York City, in order to get a sewing machine. You gotta have you gotta be like a dignitary. You gotta be like famous, whole lot of money, and it's still hard to get it.
It's lock yourself, my man. You better not get caught with it.
Exactly. You're gonna be under the jail, right? In New York City. So when they do that, it's not to keep, you safe. They don't care about keeping you safe. Because anybody that's a criminal, guess what they're gonna have? They're gonna have a gun. They're gonna have a sewing machine. They're gonna have it. They don't care. They're gonna have it at all times. It's gonna stay on them. But they want to make it so that you can't have one. What you think would happen in a Buffalo mass shooting if those brothers had sewing machines? Right. He would have ran back out, right? He in this manifesto, he literally said he's coming because he knows that the laws there are very strict on having swords. That's why he came there. He didn't go to the hood. He didn't go to the hood, did he?
Nah, lie.
He didn't go to where you see, brothers standing on the corner,
Mm-hmm.
selling. He didn't go to that. Because they done fired back on him, right? He went to black people shopping at a grocery store with their family and all that. And to show you, that's how they do with their laws and treaties. The treaties is to keep you in line. It's not to keep them in line. So, play a few more of this.
Meanwhile, Colorado Territorial Governor John Evans sought votes by rousing anti-Indian sentiment. He established a new regiment of Indian fighters, and Colonel John M. Shivington, also running for office, led the regiment off in search of a fight in order to justify its existence. Near dawn, Shivington encountered Black Kettle's band camped near a bend in the Sand Creek. His well-armed men attacked the sleeping camp, butchering women and children and taking scalps. By afternoon, they had killed some 500 innocent people. The Cheyennes sought revenge in frequent attacks that did not end until the Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867.
While most professional soldiers, surprisingly, on the plains, were more interested in peaceable solutions. Custer, perhaps most notably in Oklahoma, raided a mixed village of Cheyennes, Comanches, and Kiowas in the Battle of the Washita, in which he and his soldiers basically overran a sleeping village just at dawn and murdered mostly women and children. He was in the Indian war business in order to make a name for himself.
By now, many Southern Cheyennes were living alongside Arapaho Indians on a reservation in Oklahoma. The federal agent there was Britton Darlington, an elderly but industrious Quaker. He secured additional land from the government and built many improvements for the Indians' benefit. Men like Darlington believed in the possibility of peace between Indians and non-Indians, but others, like U.S. Army General Philip Sheridan, could be satisfied only by defeating Indians with military means. In 1874, Indians grew desperate and increased their attacks on white hunters, surveying teams, and wagon trains in a last-ditch attempt to preserve their way of life. But Sheridan used this as an excuse for punitive expeditions against every native tribe in the area.
So as they going to their land, he stopped, they doing the raids on the wagons and all of that to stop them from coming to their land. And now he uses this as a reason to go destroy and kill all Native Americans.
He systematically destroyed the camps of all Southern Cheyennes not living on the Darlington Agency. He then singled out 31 men, including Chief Minnie and one woman, put them in irons, and sent them to Fort Marion Prison in Florida. While the Southern Cheyennes were slowly losing out to people settling on their land, the Northern Cheyennes' biggest problem at first was people coming through their land.
The Cheyenne area that they were making use of in the northern plains was not directly in the gold rush area, but it was an area that miners came through to get to where they were looking for silver and gold.
Cheyennes, led by Chiefs Little Wolf and Dull Knife, made alliances with Sioux bands under Chief Red Cloud. Together, they laid siege to Fort Phil Kearny. Like most Army officers, Lieutenant W.J. Fetterman was not used to Indian-style warfare. Fetterman let himself be drawn into an ambush and was killed, along with 81 soldiers. For the moment, at least, such victories helped the Indians to make their point. The government abandoned its forts along the trail and established 2 reservations in South Dakota, where some Cheyennes agreed to settle. Most, however, remained on the open land. When gold was discovered in the Black Hills region in South Dakota, Indians refused to sell the land. White greed overcame common decency, and the U.S. War Department invented various reasons to send the Army after the Cheyennes. 3 different units pursued the Cheyennes to the area of the Little Bighorn River in June of 1876. One was led by General George Armstrong Custer. This time, Custer's lust for glory would cost him dearly. He rushed to attack a force of Indians without knowing its true size. By day's end, Custer and at least 250 soldiers and officers lay dead. The Indians knew that their great victory at the Little Bighorn would bring down the wrath of the white government. The northern Cheyennes hid out with the Sioux and remained in the...
You see how they do? They're trying to come into their land. And they're fighting them, coming at them. And when they win, now they're going to unleash the wrath of all it. Because you know, that's what they use. They use a couple devils dying to now they're going to start putting publications out, newspaper articles. They're going to start recruiting more and more men. You're going to have people coming from Virginia to come and fight the Native Americans. Right? They're going to start doing that.
Countryside for as long as possible. But with few horses and little food, they spent the winter near starvation. Finally, most of the northern Cheyennes surrendered at Fort Robinson in Nebraska. They were now at the mercy of a government that seemed to know only cruelty. In the blazing summer of 1877, 1,000 Cheyennes were forced to walk for 70 days to reach Oklahoma. The journey killed or sickened many of them, and the conditions at their destination did not relieve their misery. The next year, Little Wolf, Dull Knife, and other chiefs left the reservation and led a small band back toward the North Country. Their escape was discovered, but the Cheyennes managed to hold off the 4th Cavalry and press onward.
So it just basically went through a little bit of, you got to see a little bit what was going on. So you see our people, we always been, you know, we've been trying to live peaceful, man. Our whole life. We've been trying, since we've been anywhere, we've been trying to be peaceful. But it's time to end that, man.
Right.
Stop being peaceable. Like, I you know what I'm saying? That don't mean go destroy everything, but stop trying to, what I mean by be peaceful is assimilate. Stop assimilating. Because the Bible does say be peaceable among all men, right?
Right.
But what I mean by that is don't assimilate. Don't mix your cultures in with theirs.
Right.
Keep your culture. All right?
Right.
Anybody got any questions? Anything anybody want to bring up? All right, with that, pass the class over to Priest and Officer SHALAM.
Class on one. All right, this is the I.S.U.P.K. security announcements. Where the I.S.U.P.K. started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for a new brother and sister. When a new brother and sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6-month period, the brother or sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. Numbers 18 and 21, Malachi 3, 8 through 10. Ma'ashra means 10th in the Hebrew. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you, give to the Treasury Department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like. Upcoming holy convocations is the ending of the Feast of First Fruits, which is Sunday, June 12th. Starts at sundown. Remind Akim and Akwakim to check the bulletin board in the hallway. If anyone wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing our black boots, shirts, pants, headband, and scarves, and to Google address every time they are heading to the school. And with that, we'll give the teacher a courtesy salute. Men of Israel, Amijah, which means stand. Amijah Shabbat, Amijah, Barak, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shabbat.
Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shabbat.
Yamata, which means hands down. Class dismissed.